Well, I'll just open up and give Anne a little bit of an intro in that my name is Rhonda Baird, and I've worked with the Permaculture Guild since it was founded in 2006. It's seen a re-emergence since November of last year, and I welcome everyone that's here. Anne and I have known each other since 2005 when she took the permaculture design course in the very first course that I apprenticed as a teacher, right after my own course. So we've been collaborating since then. And at the last Permaculture Guild meeting, she offered to give this presentation, which she
to the guild only.
To the guild, which turned into a bigger thing. And it's a presentation that you have given to different communities in the past year.
Yeah.
Including the North American Permaculture Convergence in Hopland, California last September. So thank you, Anne.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I mean, the reason we're in the auditorium is they didn't have another room for us, so that's why we made it bigger.
But it's perfect.
It's perfect, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be going pretty fast through these slides, though I will pause at different times and comment. But this is an evolutionary process that we're looking at, and if I do the first one, is that right? No, that isn't right. Okay, first one. I'm not getting it. Oh, no. Sorry, I just went too fast. All right, we're going to get this worked out. Bree, why don't you come up here? Somebody needs to come up here. I need to go just to the second. Okay, here it is. Okay. Now, the reason I'm up here as the second slide, normally I wouldn't do that, but this project that we've done was made possible by a legacy that my husband left me, okay? That's provided the funds when we needed the funds to keep going. So I thank him for that. Instead of being the old lady who holds her money so that it'll help her get old, I decided a different kind of security is a smarter thing to do, which is community security. So I'm utilizing the money for that purpose. And so I thank him very much. I don't know what he'd think about it, but I think he'd like it, actually. So the next one. So it's important to realize that, but you wonder how many people of my age, I'm 74 years old, how many people of my age are there in this town who, have resources, and they're surrounded by a bunch of students who have no resources. In fact, they're heavily in debt. And there's this huge divide between them. So what we've done is put together these two generations of old and young, and we'd like to get more mid with Mariella here. We'd like to get a completely intergenerational feel to what we're doing, which is starting to happen. So here's the map of Green Acres neighborhood. It's huge. It's 450 houses. And there's if you look here, this is where Green Acres is, okay? So when I saw that map for the first time, I thought, oh my God, IU is going to want this neighborhood, because that's IU, right? So then I thought, well, how can we make it so we can be an asset for IU but keep our independence? And we'd like to see us running programs through the neighborhood so that the neighborhood becomes like a laboratory for IU, even though we keep our independence. Programs of many kinds. We already have had lots of interns. We did 2 sustainability classes that were in the garden. The initiation has already begun. Okay, then the next slide is even more telling. All those red houses are rentals, okay? They're all registered rentals. It's 65% registered rentals of the 440 houses. That's a lot. And the owners don't live there. I mean, in general. Okay, here's the signs. Kat, if you could please stand, where are you? Or show people. Kat was the person that initiated a project to get our borders recognized by us, so that now people come in and they know they're in Green Acres. We had 5 signs made thanks to a small and simple grant by the city. Pardon me?
Neighborhood improvement?
Excuse me, yes, a bigger one. A big grant, neighborhood improvement grant. And then the first one of them was stolen immediately.
Sorry.
I'm
Put
sorry.
that over here.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. One of them was stolen immediately. We can't prove what happened, but we think we know. But the others are still there. They all have this logo has been there for many, many years. So they all have the logo and then something else on their sign. Okay, here's the original two-house pod that we have, and I have another one. We've just added another house. Here's the other house. So then we have, these are the three houses that constitute what we call as the first pod, the milkweed pod of the Green Acres Village. And we are permaculturing. Our intent is to permaculture the entire situation. And we've gone pretty far with parts of it, but there's so much more to do. We want it so that every little corner in there is going to have something that is going to be yielding for us some kind of benefit. And it's going to be beautiful, too. And where's Rebecca? Where's Rebecca? Once Rebecca came, the aesthetics of the place started to improve. Okay, so this is the purchase of the third house. Now here's an example. I hope you can see it. It was pretty dark that night, but this is an example of one of our community dinners, and the people just, it was kind of hilarious. You know, in your old family, they always want you to take pictures of your family. Nobody ever wants to do it, but everybody does. They wanted to do it. So everybody stood up and went and posed. These are the people that were there at one of the community dinners. Here's the people on the way to another community dinner. They were walking in a parade to Mariella's house. She's down in the front there, where we had our final community dinner of the spring season last year. We have community dinners every week during the semesters, during the school semesters. And we have been visioning more children in the neighborhood, and that is starting to happen, which is just so beautiful. The school bus comes down the street and picks up 4 or 5 in front of my house, and then goes down and picks up Mariella's kids. And you know, there weren't kids before. There weren't. I mean, there were many, many kids back in the 50s. They knit the neighborhood together, and then the schools, became more important, and so the rentals started with the undergraduates who walk down the street. They have no idea they're in a neighborhood. Some of our community dinners also include music. A lot of times we're out in the patio, Green Acres Lounge. It's another chalk drawing. We have chalk drawings. We have a lot of art, which is wonderful, a wonderful way to knit people together. And self-expression is really important. Here's what another thing Kat organized, which is the Witchy Women's Equinox celebration and ceremony in 2015, I think it was. And we made a collage, or whatever. We drew on a big piece of paper. And there's Mariella's child, Asiri, who was very serious about it. Okay, let's now go to the backstory from 2003 on to show why it's really important that we're doing what we're doing. Ghana, Green Acres Neighborhood Association, was something that began many, many years ago in this, I don't know, Kathy, where's Kathy? Because your husband was one of the first people that got it going. When was it, the 70s? Something like the 70s. And then it's gone up and down and up and down. I think a lot of neighborhoods are like that in this town. And then in 2003, Georgia Shake, one of my neighbors, she decided she'd get it going again. Now, I had just gone to an intentional community gathering. I had just been widowed. My husband died. He came here. We were here for 3 months, and then he died. And I had just decided to go to an intentional community conference over in Ohio. I went over there, and I watched the movie called Peak Oil, The Power of Community, something like that. It was about what happened to Cuba when the spigots stopped flowing because the Soviet Union went down. okay? And it's a really worthwhile movie if anybody hasn't seen it. Because what happened there was they had to use human and animal labor to do farming from then on. They couldn't use tractors. They lost an average of 20 pounds that first year. Havana started to grow food inside the city. On my way back from that conference, I found myself in a visions of Mad Max. You know, oh my God, what if that happened here? What if the transportation stopped with just-in-time everything? You know, things would disappear off the shelves very, very quickly. How are we going to survive? And I thought, oh my God, I've got to join an intentional community. Oh God, you know, circle the wagons, close the gates. And then there was this little voice inside me that said, you don't need to do that. Just change perceptions in your neighborhood. This tiny little voice, just change perceptions. Well, that's not easy. Not in this culture where individualism is like the chief virtue. So, but that was what I was going to do. So I went to what Hand put on, which is every summer they put on something for neighborhoods where the neighborhoods get together and they have tables. You've probably seen them out at the market. And I said, do I have a neighborhood? You know, what's my neighborhood? Oh my God, and it's called Green Acres. I thought that was pretty hilarious. And there was Georgia. And I said to her, okay, I'll join and do what we're doing here. But it's got to be a culture of creativity, not complaint. Because that's been historically true about neighborhood associations. It has to do with complaint, so it's not very interesting to me. So let's do creativity. She was totally into it. So we started to do all sorts of things. You know, ice cream socials and a parade. We had a wishing tree one solstice. We had visiting speakers that were, we actually met in the church. What's that church that you go to, Kathy? That First United Church. That's where we were meeting across the street from Green Acres. And we had speakers, we had all sorts of things going on. But the problem is we're in a neighborhood where you've got constant flow, right? Constant flow. The kids come and then they go again in June. They go again. And so I'd get a core group of people together and then they'd go. And then I'd get so depressed until I started to realize, now wait a minute. Think about them as a flow, as a permaculturist, just like water or air. And they're kids that are going to learn something from being here, and then they're going to go out like spores in the wind, and who knows what will happen next, but I bet they're going to remember their little experience of community and land-based orientation when they go. So, but that didn't come until I took the permaculture class. So here's the original, a picture of what we put up on the board when we did our little practicum. You do a practicum for 1 week of the permaculture course. It's a 2-week-long course. And Peter Bain said, why don't you do a permaculture design for your neighborhood? There were 3 of us who were in the neighborhood at the time that were taking that course, so we did. And, you know, it's like a classic thing. We should really put it behind glass. And here we did, we put it in, you know, more obvious terms. And then it became the Green Acres Neighborhood Plan, which was done in conjunction with the city. We've spent like 9 months creating a plan which incorporated all the principles that and all the plans that we had with our permaculture design. And unfortunately, these kinds of things tend to be bureaucratically, you know, articulated. So I wrote an introduction for it, which is not bureaucratic. So if you want to look at it, it's on the CityGov site, and it's pretty interesting. So, and here's our vision statement. Green Acres aims to become a sustainable community that embraces neighborliness and forces partnerships within and beyond its borders. That word sustainable we put in at the end. It's so far, the only neighborhood that has that word in it. So here's the garden in 2016, this summer. This is the garden that we started, and I'll show you how we started it. Here's Bree, one of the people that's here. Where are you, Bree? In the garden. Here's a bunch of us posing after one of our work parties in the summer of 2016. Here's way back in 2010, 2 young women that were there. I mean, we've had a flow of people, just so many people. Here's the garden, the Green Acres Neighborhood Association, the Green Acres Neighborhood Garden Gang, how it began. Okay, so I took the permaculture course, but I still didn't know how to garden. And I had bought the house next door because Nathan Harmon, a permaculture person, had said, why don't you buy that house because it has a sunny garden, or a sunny green lawn. Sunny. You know, that's hard in Bloomington. You don't find that too often. So I bought it at the top of the market like a fool, but money's never been the bottom line for me. It's like the purpose of what we're doing has to happen, so we're doing it. And so so I decided, okay, the only way I can do it is to have workshops and bring in teachers, which is how we started. There's the hole we dug for the pond. We dug that in November. Here's the lawn. You know, there's the lawn. And here's the pond, you know, when it was in its heyday a year later. It's gorgeous, isn't it? And here's, you know, beautiful lotuses which started appearing. Here it is from across the pond. Now here it is. Yeah, here's the little sitting area we've had lots of social events out in that sitting area. For example, there was a solstice party that was actually at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something. I can't remember whether this was it, but solstice happened to be were you there? Happened to be really early and they came anyway. I couldn't believe it. And here's our gate. We finally put a gate in that people would recognize. Before that, you had to know where it was, or you had to know how to get in. And we put a sign up, which then deteriorated. And I'll show you that later, what happened to that. So the workshop years. And they started with a bang. We had 6, 7, looks like 7 that first year, with one of them a 2-day workshop, and that was the pond. And the Blooming Foods picked up on it immediately and gave us a lot of publicity, so we had really good turnout to all of them. The first year was Keith Johnson, one of the principal permaculture teachers in the United States, who used to live here with Peter, who's another one. And he was the guy that did all the workshops the first year. So I'll go quickly. So this was the invitation I sent out. And here's some of the workshops. As you can see, here's this woman here, up on the right, top right. These are some plants that one woman brought for the pond, which we put in there. We didn't know she was going to do it. It was great. Once in a while, things will show up, but we don't know where they came from, or we do. And it turns out some of those might not have been a good idea, because we've had stuff take over the pond. The pond is really now a wetlands. Still holds water, but it's no longer gorgeous the way it used to be. Here's the very first workshop, the bushes and pear tree. The bushes are gone now. The pear tree still exists, but it's hardly had any pears on it. So we don't know what we're doing with fruit trees yet, at least not that one. The Lasagna Garden, we didn't know. I mean, he showed us how to do that. The pond workshop, day 1. You know, which the pond has old carpet, and then a really thick rubbery thing, and then an old carpet on top of that. So it's 3 layers. And so, but unfortunately, the roots eventually do poke through, and so then it starts draining out. And then, of course, birds bring in more and more seeds, and so it starts filling, and it's just the way it is. You could fight it if you want, but we decided not to. Here's what we call the Gulag. I had a basketball court in my backyard. Of course, this is Indiana. And so we smashed up some of that cement and made what we call urbanite, which is there. Urbanite, which is it still lines the pond, okay? And here it is, it's getting more done. And you see now we started to put plants in it. And here it is now. You can't see it very well, but you see it really is a tangled mass. There's still lots of frogs. There are a few fish. There are, what else is in there? Frogs, mostly frogs. But the insects love it. It's still a very vital place. As a matter of fact, I was standing, this is something I don't usually say, but I was standing once, not very long ago, like 2 years ago, standing right by the pond. And I felt, all of a sudden, I felt this huge rush of energy, and it felt like Earth's soul had come up and grabbed me. It was the most powerful experience I think I've ever had. And I just had to just say, okay. It was like, that's when I really recognized just how much we are in communion with her and how much she's helping us. So the pond has its own presence. It's still very, very strong. And of course we have lots of parties. Here's now the social event, because there's more people coming now, we have more social events in the backyard. Here's the decorations for a Halloween party, which we also did inside in case we wanted to go inside. And here's Kat preparing, having a great time, making candied apples. And then somebody said, well, we should have an Ask the Oracle, which is me. I became the Oracle. That was pretty hilarious. They'd come in really like this. And they'd sit on the little stool, and I would take their little hand and give them like 5 minutes. And they were very serious about it. I thought, oh boy. Okay, so now here's what happened. The sign started to deteriorate, so we had to get a new sign. But the regulations in the city had changed. It had to be smaller. So we made a smaller sign and put it on the fence. Here's still that first year, prepping, planning for the fall garden. If anybody wants, I can give them Keith's Alchemy of Seedling Soil, which is, his way of doing it. So that was 2009. Now we go to 2010. We had an IU SPIA class, compost design and construction, and then, 6 more workshops. I mean, this was very ambitious in the beginning, but that's how we got it going. The whole thing got going through workshops. So here's the compost SPIA barrel project, which they didn't really work very well, and compost systems, apparently, a lot of them don't work very well because they don't get hot enough. So it was okay, and the kids had a great time doing it. And here's Nathan. So the second year I had Rhonda, who's here, and Nathan as the teachers. So we had 2 more teachers. So there's Nathan pruning for fruit workshop. When we did our seedlings that year, we put them out on my front porch and then put them in the living room at night. That's changed. Now we have a real greenhouse. You should come by and see it. It even has a beautiful little wood stove in it. That is made out of the garage. Where is Colin? Where's my son? He was here. There he is. This is where, when this was a garage, that's where he started the Garden Tower project, was in that garage. So now it's become a greenhouse and a bunkhouse for woofers, which we also have people coming through, and we have a drying room for herbs. Here's one of Colin's garden towers. And that's funny, because these plants, what are they called? Some kind of plant that propagates itself by itself. What is it called? Mustard greens, okay. Those mustard greens grew in that hugelkultur that I showed you. And so I transplanted them to the porch where I had the garden tower. Here's another workshop we had that year. Notice there's a rabbit in the back who lasted many years. Here was the planning for our garden. Pests, there were plenty of them. Here's storing the harvest. So we did lots of storing and preserving as workshops too. We weren't just always outside, sometimes we were inside. And 2011. Now notice 2011 there aren't as many workshops. And I notice I also have some stuff in red here, the Cobb Oven Saga, which I need to tell you about. So the shiitake mushrooms children's garden art, which I had by this time, I decided to get a person that ran the garden, okay? So I didn't have regular workshops anymore, but we had a garden master, basically, and it was a young woman who had been in one of the courses that was taught at SPIA. She said, I'll do it. So I said, great. And her experience was that she had been with her mother as a gardener when she was young. So she knew enough to get it going. And she loved children. She wanted to have a children's garden party. So we did. It was really fun. By the way, this year, if anybody's interested, we're going to have a fairy garden party for adults and children, and you have to wear wings. Or you don't get in. I mean, we have to be having a good time or it's not worth it, right? Okay, so now, notice that picture in the corner. This is the cob oven saga, during which we learn how to confront and begin to learn how to integrate the collective shadow. See that shadow? It's coming out of the mirror. Okay, so I got to stop and tell you a story. So we did this. I will go into more, but we had a situation that came up because of a neighbor. And you know, in a neighborhood, you're going to have these situations. This is what happens. You have polarities that develop. What do you do with those? That's the important thing, is what do you do with it? Do you leave it like this, or you find a way to work with it? So at first it was like this, and I was like furious. I wanted to kill her. I did. I really didn't like this at all. And I stayed with that feeling about what I was feeling about it, and I just kept moving it in my body, just what's going on here. And then I started to realize that all of the qualities that I couldn't stand about my neighbor, I had. Okay? We're both argumentative. We're both like little banty roosters. We both had little dogs. We both want our way. It's all true. And then oh my God, she's me. Once I realized that, I could begin to feel my way into her and what it must have felt like to be her with me across the street, you know, who was having such a good time, and she was all alone. And so then I started to just, you know, oh, wow, something started to change in me. And it took 6 months, and once it did, then we could work with it creatively, because until it did, it was a toxic situation. Now, of course, this happens with individuals too, not just collectives. But every time we see a shadow, we need to go, well, where is that in me? What is that in me?
Well, Ann,
Yeah.
so they built a cob oven, and she called the city and.
Yeah, I'm going to go to that. I'm going to tell all that.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so it started with, we built a wall that was just to illustrate how to build a wall. And you know, when I think about it, and I think, why did I allow that to happen? Because there was this wall, which then there it is, which this same neighbor called the Berlin Wall, and I don't blame her, you know. At the time, I tried to think of it, well, it's just a way to define the edges of the garden. Here it is from the outside. It did look pretty imposing and not very inviting. And here's Colin, he's up there still, who got together with Nathan and Scott to design something here which was going to hold a cob oven, which some SPIA kids wanted to do for another project for another sustainability class, okay? A cob oven, what a great idea. We live in a student neighborhood. We can have students come once every 2 months and we'll do a pizza party. That was the idea, okay? Fabulous idea. So they did, and I couldn't find a picture that I could enlarge, but you can kind of get the feeling of these kids, you know, doing the cob with their feet, the straw, the sand, and the dirt. They loved it. It was middle of November, and they loved it. And they built the oven, they designed and built the oven with the help of Nathan, who had done this before. And here's the final cob oven. Okay, So we were going to have, remember, pizza parties every 2 months. Well, the very first time we had a pizza party, the smoke happened to go in her direction, which it never does, never. But it did. And she wouldn't close her windows. So it was like, she was pissed. She called the city, and so, you know, and I already told you it's a story. But so what happened was the city came. So the city came. The planning department, Tom Makuta came. He said, you know, now that we've got a complaint, we got to investigate this project. We want to look at all aspects of it. And he said, you know, you are the pioneer. What you're going to be doing is going to be commonplace in 15 years. But meanwhile, you get the flack, and I'm the guy that has to make sure the laws are obeyed. And you know, with that remark, he helped me recognize that I was just playing a role, he was just playing a role. We were two human beings in relationship with one another. And ever since then, I haven't had an antagonistic relationship with anybody in the city because I recognize that. You know, we're just having a good time together, trying to figure out ways to do what we need to be doing. And so I really thank Tom for his tremendous lesson for me, because another one of my projections, my shadow projections, is that I hated my father when I was growing up, right? So there it is. Okay, so I said there was going to be a creative move after the 6 months were up and I had finally figured out why I was feeling like that, and that something had to change because we had to take the cob oven down. They were insisting that we take the cob oven down, or she was insisting. And the wall. The whole thing had to come down. So what we did was a ceremony of impermanence, a formal ceremony of impermanence. And I asked everyone, would you please bring a piece of paper that has some attitude that you want to let go of. And so there we are, looking pretty glum. It was a rainy day. No, it's not so bad anymore. Somehow the mood is lifting. And we put all our stuff, we put all our little pieces of paper and had one tiny little fire. And then we started hacking at it, and I got the first whack. This is the best picture of whacking, though. So everybody got 3 whacks. And then we scattered the ashes the parts of the oven in the garden, and I took part of it home, and other people took relics of it home also. Then the very next day or the next week or something, Colin made a cut in the wall because we had to take the wall down too. Now that was not easy because these are really heavy walls, and I'll tell you, we still don't have them repurposed. They're in the backyard. They will be repurposed, but they haven't been repurposed yet. And so we had all these people come that had to help us do it, and they did. Men came. We put out the call, we need a bunch of strong men. They came. And then usually what we do if we have some kind of party like that, we'll have a potluck afterwards. Okay, the cob oven saga continued in the sense that the next year I got another person in to be the garden master, and he turned out to be a very introverted person who didn't really like to share the garden. So the garden kind of went into like a latency period, but he was fascinated with hugelkultur, and he got us going on hugelkultur. So I look back and I think, thank you, Jim, for doing that. He was there for 2 years. For those 2 years, we were like scared to go in the garden, because we might not do it right. He was very much of a perfectionist. He didn't like to grow very much, so not much happened. So you might say that, yeah, we cleared it with the ceremony, but it still had to go through a period of latency before we could begin again, which we did. We began again when Rebecca arrived. Put your hand up again. Thank you. So I call these the Rebecca years. Because finally we had a person who knew what she was doing on a very deep level. It's in her bones. And so she carries this huge wealth of understanding the earth in her body. And the minute I saw this woman, I knew she was my partner in this. I just knew it. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. And so she came on board, and it's been the two of us and everybody else ever since. And it took a while. I mean, there were a couple people normal renters, normal graduate student renters in the house she was in, the other house, and they wouldn't even talk to her. She's like, "How am I going to do?" I said, "Well, they'll leave sooner. They'll leave soon enough." And they did. And then they started to get the people that really wanted to do what we were doing. So everything we've done has been very slow and gradual. And I think that's kind of a lesson, is if it's worth it, it's going to take time. It's not going to be something you can do quickly. Okay, now to the sign saga. Here's the beginning of it, which happened to be at a CONA event, Council of Neighborhood Associations, if you don't know that. They didn't do it this year, I don't know why, but they've been doing parties in January. And there was our picture in the paper. So there's Rebecca, and who's the guy? John, me, Georgia, the first person that I was with doing anything here, Kat, and the other two, Melissa, and who is the one behind? Heather. These were the people that were in Kat's group to get the signs done. And that was a year-long project, right? I mean, altogether. Over a year, yeah. So there they are. This is when they were turning in the huge document they have to turn in to just apply to get this thing. And they're like 10 minutes away from having to go downtown. I'm hoping they're going to make it by the deadline. And they do. And Vicky's very thrilled too, because she was really helping them a lot. Vicky at the hand department. She was marshaling them through the whole thing. And here's the state of the living room afterwards. I took them all out for a beer at Lenny's afterwards. Now, here's the latest two additions who are here tonight. Ari and Dan. Ari just got back from a 1,000-mile bike ride down the West Coast, right? Yeah. And here's our new CSA, which was instituted by Rebecca and Bree. And there's the garden design. And here is the wonderful sink that Lenny's gave to us that they didn't need anymore. So it's now out in the garden, so we wash our vegetables there by the pond. And we have other special events that sometimes just come up spontaneously, like a pumpkin party. Or the next thing is these, the little libraries, which are all over town, and we have some too. And then in the backyard, at the same time that the little libraries were going on, we were making flower boxes for the signs. And down in the corner there was I think I saw, Brian is here too. Where's Brian? Brian, we had a little gifting circle that was really wonderful for about 5 meetings, something like that. And it didn't continue, but the attitude of gifting has been there ever since. And I look at the economics or the economy as 3 different layers. You've got the top layer, which is the usual one of money. And then there's, you might say, the tribal one of trading. And then there's the gifting layer, where everybody's just giving what they can, giving who they are, all of who they are, the way nature does it. Nature doesn't need money. Nature doesn't even trade. They just keep gifting. All the animals, all the plants, all the insects, they just keep gifting. So that's where real abundance comes in. So here's community dinners. As I said, we do them once a week. 1 person in the 2-house pod that we have, and we'll have 3 soon because we just got this other house. 1 person takes the lead, and we have all sorts of different kinds, including old family recipes, Peruvian, Italian, Southeast Asian, Greek, and so forth. And anywhere between 12 and 24 people come to each one of these. They're not always the same people. They're not always neighbors. Some of them are neighbors. Some are just friends. Mothers, fathers, grandmothers. It's great. I think this was Ari's. This was your old family recipes, right? Oh, that was Baba Ganoush, yeah, for the Greek. There's another one. When I put this thing together in the first place, and I gave it to the village members, I said, okay, give me a critique. And they said, well, we need more on the dinners. Okay, we'll have more on the dinners. Here's another. Now, this was a breakfast after summer solstice. Here's a little, what do you call the where you find stuff? The kids did this.
Scavenger hunt?
Scavenger hunt, the kids did. And here's the winners. Here's is Andrea here? She's not here, but Ryan's here. Here's somebody explaining what the time bank is. If you don't know what it is, ask Ryan afterwards. But it's a great way to, it's actually something going towards gifting, where you give of your time, everybody's time is equal. So this was an orientation meeting that was happening before one of our dinners. Here's a few more. I blog on this all the time, whether it's on my Exo Permaculture blog or now the Green Acres Village blog also is working. So, and here's, everywhere that Rebecca goes, by the way, there's aesthetics. Like this is the little bitty tiny garden in a tiny hollow log. Or here's something, an old elm tree when it came down, we had logs like this, which went in the 2 original hugelkultures. And so she has stuff happening around the bottom of that. This is one of the places that used to be part of the basketball court and is now one of the wonderful gardens in the backyard by the, where we have our social events now on the patio. We call it a patio now because that's what it is. And we have a number of gardens there. Here's some passion flower fruit. Oh, that's the other thing. Show more of the gardens. Okay. So here's gourds that were still there hanging at the end of the summer. Here's the fig tree, which is amazing how it grows there. And the solar panels on the roof, that works for both houses, by the way. It's the first time Duke had ever done that. Hooked up 2 houses together, and they didn't even give us any grief about it. Here's some tiny hot purple peppers, tools shared with other neighbors. And here's the choice. What shall it be? Young people, broke, isolated, with menial jobs and no prospects, separated from old people, often rich, habit-bound, and lonely, rattling around alone in their spacious homes, both scared of the future, wondering what's next. Or a vibrant, intergenerational community that focuses on the common good while appreciating the individual gifts of all. That's what we're about. This is from last summer. Notice nobody's on a cell phone. Nobody. Everybody's intently listening. Here is the, you see that? Do you see the little fairy in there? Do you see the fairy? It's a little green thingy that somebody took a picture of. And that was during that same thing that the kids did. Here's some other kids. Oh, Bree, would you come up here because we're about ready to do that final slide. Here's some other kids. These kids were there, oh gosh, when was it? 2010. And they would come over every day after school and help me. This was the final day that we were together. And their parents moved, as always happens, they moved out of state. But they were such soulful beings, and that's why we're doing this. That we're doing this for the kids. We just are. We have to know that, feel that all the time. So for more information, you can ask me. Here's another shot of the music. Here's our new videographer, Joaquim, who the last week did a little video, which we're going to show you and have it play. This is the final shot.
Let's see if I can.
Oh, we may not make it, huh? Gotta have a play. She got it to go once.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do it. This isn't like
maybe
a
not,
regular
huh?
PowerPoint.
What?
Out of the slideshow, back up into.
Out of the slideshow back up into the.
Yeah, into that.
Okay, and then make it play? Maybe you should come up here, Ari. Because we got to show this. It just gives the feeling of that evening. Logan, there's another guy that's moved in. He had to work tonight, who's a musician, and Dan's a musician. So we have more music now that is in-house, not just coming in.
Yeah.
So this was great because Logan and little Fatima were totally synchronized with each other in this. How do you get it to go? She got it at home.
I did get it. I don't know.
What about down there? There it is down there. Oh, well, that's not, we can't do that. Oh, shoot, we may not make it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry.
There's
But this little girl's going, and he's going. So it was so much fun. There's such joy when we're just in a loving relationship with each other. And there's so much more affection that's coming through now as a result of all that we've been doing, that it just feels so wonderful. Okay, that's the end of the slideshow. And now what we're going to do is take 5 minutes, and then the people that either live in the neighborhood, if they want to come, or in the village, if they want to come up, and anybody who comes to the dinners, if you want to come up, we're going to set up a bunch of chairs and then have a Q&A and discussion. Okay. And Kat told me I had to shut up now, so you will not hear another word from me.
Well, we could start by just like saying our names. I'm Katerina. I lived in Green Acres, what years? The summer of 2015 through February of, no, summer of 2014 through February of 2016.
I'm Ari, and I live at Green Acres currently, and I moved in July 15th of last year.
And I'm Bree, and I moved in the summer of 2015.
And I'm Julene, and I own a house on Eastgate Lane, and I've lived in Green Acres since the 90s.
Nice.
We have two other people. Dan lives at Green Acres, and Logan lives there.
Dan moved in right around the time I moved in, and Logan just moved in recently, so.
Lean toward the mics.
All right. The third house we and just bought, and currently there's like renovations being done to it, and it should be ready soon to have 2 people move in, 2, 3-ish people. 3 people move in. So yeah.
And we're also trying to create another like common space with that house. So I think creating more common spaces in general is something that we're trying to do. So like not only the garden, the patio, the greenhouse, sort of like can be a communal seed starting, seed saving, fermenting space. And then the garage of the latest house is going to be converted into like an all-purpose workshop. Maybe like kids' art classes there. Rebecca has a background with art and pottery, and she still has a kiln, and maybe we could start doing different kinds of workshops again in that space.
Different kinds of workshops on putting food up, preserving, different kind of art workshops that people would like to do. Any kind of public education will probably be, that anybody's interested in teaching there, we possibly could do. The idea, and then the other thing that wasn't mentioned earlier is getting, the original vision was to have the whole neighborhood, a lot of the neighborhood as an eco-village. And in this past year, we've had, there was a family that moved in across the street from us that came from Davis, California. Is Dave Chico? Was it Davis or Chico? That partly bought the house across the street because of what we're doing there. So we had a flash mob in their front yard this year because she's actually a teacher at IU in fiber arts, and she's growing some things. She wants to grow some things in her front yard that will lend to dyes and things like that. And then some other people across the street asked us told us that we could use their backyard for farming, and they want to completely redo their front yards into garden eventually. So this is what I know my personal thing is, to get people to put gardens in their front yards or backyards, either one, I don't care, but something. And so we're really hoping to be an inspiration for that. And so far, this past year, 2 people have done that, which I'm really happy about in the immediate neighborhood, and I'm hoping it just catches on. When we can get across to people that it's actually not as hard as it seems. I realize people have time constraints, and this is something Ryan, your name's Ryan, right? We talked about last week with the, food policy conference. We talked about, how people are so busy, how can they grow their own food? So we're trying to find ways to do that, and but the main way we are doing it right now is to be an inspiration for people to be able to feel empowered to do that. So, and that it's not as hard as you might think. Especially with permaculture, there's ways to do it that make it feasible for a lot of people. So.
Yeah.
Do you have connections with realtors that could help, if they can find people that are wanting to live in this kind of place where they can garden and is there a way to get a connection to when homes come up for sale in there, that people who are coming in and around Bloomington?
Yeah, that's something we've thought of, that I've thought of a lot, is getting hooked up with some, we aren't presently, but it would be nice to find realtors who could even market to the East and West Coast. People out there don't realize how inexpensive places are here, who already want to do this sort of a thing. Instead of re-educating people, there's people that are already educated that could move in and start doing it right away if we could network with realtors.
One thing that has been going on before I ever came in was the neighborhood association had all of the houses for sale on a it's still there. So people can access what houses are up for sale, so what's in the neighborhood. And one of the things that in the past couple years, the websites have been kind of consolidated and redefined. So the Eco Village website has it's a static site that explains the vision of Green Acres Village and how people can get involved into that, especially if they want to move there, and try to be able to find resources for that. So no specific realtors, but there have been.
There is one realtor that's really
There's-
interested.
Okay. So one thing about what Rebecca was saying, and a question that came earlier while I was out in the audience, was that how can who can help me start a garden, and who can help me start my own garden on my property? And I know that the conversations come up here. That's something that I would even pose to the Permaculture Guild and to this audience, how to start helping people. I think there needs to be a wave of engaging people who are interested in not just gardening, but in permaculture, but kind of moving into this kind of way of life, and helping them guide them through that. As a template, Green Acres Village holds a lot of space in that and a lot of inspiration, but it's not easy to go from being inspired to actually acting that out on your own. So just trying to find some kind of networks and moving forward, I think, is really important. And I know it's something that's been on all of our minds at some point.
I live in a house that's kind of a community house. We've been working on keeping it going. It's been community in some form for almost a decade. I'm kind of in charge right now. I'm the one who's the primary VC, so we are a rental, and that could change in the future. But we're interested in getting more of these kinds of things moving in our yard. It's a huge plot of land. Where's some good places to start for workshops? Like where's a good place to get started to bring people together, in addition to something like a potluck or a food gathering?
Our house.
No, I mean, at my place, like, what would be a good first step for me to bring in people from the neighborhood? There's a lot of people who are in the same mind from my neighborhood as well, and discussion about becoming more of a whole community, but my house is kind of like a central point in a lot of ways, just because.
Do this presentation.
Well, I mean, also, next, I don't know if this is super helpful, but there's like a website. It's called Nextdoor, and it's like a neighborhood Facebook thing. And I mean, if you get on there, you can like send out. When you join, it gives you like, I think 65 postcards that you can send to your neighbors to be like, hey, I'm on this website and you should too, and it's a good networking place, and there might be people in your neighborhood that are already on there, and it would just be a great place to post about your place and be like, hey, I want to do this. Is there anybody willing to collaborate? I mean, because like we as a household use that website and we talk about our dinners and like work days and stuff, and it's been super helpful, and we've had some people show up who we didn't know because of that, like, post on Nextdoor. So I think it's a thing to check out. That's what I can say. It's a place to start.
And more specifically, I'm looking for ideas for events to host. Ideas to bring people to the house and start these conversations.
Ordering seeds together,
Yeah,
or
we
I
had
don't
a-
know, it's a fun.
We had a plant share, and I belonged to some plant groups, and so I had a whole bunch of daylilies and other things, and people would bring vegetables, and you know, we didn't invite anybody, but it, you know, was kind of advertised for the neighborhood, and you get to know your neighbors, you know, with little events. I think we had also started with some little get-togethers, like, you know, home safety, you know, with, I think, didn't we have someone from the fire department come, I think, one time? So there's little events you can host to just kind of get to know everybody.
How many people are in your household?
Currently, we've got 5 adults, a dog, and 2 cats, and I think we might have a part-time roommate coming in for some summer work.
Yeah, so just networking, they could network. You could talk to people next door when you're outside. Just find out what people's interests are. Because I'm always surprised at how people really want to do things like that. They just don't know where to begin, like you just said. But if someone just initiates it, they're interested.
The way we started community dinners was with a flyer that we handed out door to door. I think we printed 250 flyers, like little quarter size, and that's how we got Mariella involved. You get some people kind of come and go. There was also events at IU that we went to. Sustainability office puts on, I can't remember what the event is called, but we went to it, and so we had people coming through from there. Every person who's come through the house tends to tell, you know, their friends to come for dinner and everything. And the dinners are really key foundation for a lot of things. But with regards to workshops, you know, Anne had that whole list of all of those things they did early on. I think communicating with your neighborhood association, if you have one, and the Permaculture Guild would be really good places to start.
When someone is interested in joining, how do they go about it, and does it always work out?
Good question.
I mean, do you have people who say, I want to rent a space, and then they find out about it, or do you recruit people?
Yes, lately it's been more networking, which I think in the long run works the best, maybe. It's too early to tell for sure, but yes, there's been several people that didn't work out. And this is really, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is a big part, if not the biggest part, is the social interaction in a community and how important that is. And we're pretty much experimental, and we're just really at the beginning of everything. And we have not developed to where we have things in place to where, say if someone's we're bumping heads with somebody badly, what we have our own thing in place right now by default. We haven't really done a lot of research into how different communities handle different things, because the communication and the interaction is the most important thing. Just like in this world, that is the most important thing to get along and to move forward and to reach our goals as a community. That has to be addressed first and foremost, and without focusing on it too much. So, yeah, there's been people, but the people who have come and gone still come around. We have not alienated anybody that I know of. Anybody who's lived there and has left on good terms. It just wasn't working out. We made sure that it was on good terms when they did leave. But we recognized in the process of that our communication with each other was lacking, and that we needed to all be on the same page on certain things. And so those were big learning experiences for us. But that I'm glad you brought that up.
And I also think like not everybody has to be like actually living in a house or like be a member or something. Like by extension, like any neighbor is essentially a part of the community. Like people who come through dinners, like I don't know. I think that's a pretty broad term that we can by extending that word. I think that's kind of part of the mission as well. So I don't think you necessarily have to live in a house or to be part of that, or by extension be a neighbor or something like that.
Yes, Ann?
So we consider ourselves a pod within a neighborhood. We happen to be the original pod. We'd like to see more pods develop in the neighborhood. Houses that are right next to each other that start sharing more. And, 2 or 3 houses. And then gradually, my feeling is, over 50 years or whatever it would take, there'd be more and more of them until finally the whole place hooks up. That would be the idea. That's the progression. So we're just here to do it and to inspire.
And could you also speak about how we connect with people who want to rent a room? If there's a room available, how has that gone on?
Well, we just advertise it so far. We think that eventually there'll be a waiting list perhaps, but right now it's just if we have a room for rent, we put the word out. But lately they've been filled through networking, so we really didn't have to advertise that much. But the house next to us isn't filled yet, so we're either going to get a family over there or 3 individuals, one or the other, or both.
Okay, so then, do you partner with other neighborhoods or have little satellite locations in other neighborhoods?
That's an idea.
I think we have really.
Well,
No, we haven't.
The co-ops we have connections to.
Yeah, the co-ops. And
Yeah.
Brendan Duncan and people, networks of people that are friends or, I don't know.
The other co-ops in town we've interacted with quite a bit.
Do you have any connections with the Bryan Park neighborhood? That's where I live. I have a lovely the sunny corner lot. I live across the street from a master gardener. I've been digging up my entire lawn for 3 years, and I want to move to the next step. And what you're doing is very inspiring, but I'm by my, I just have me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there anyone who can I talk to about who needs sort of permaculture laboratory space, who I don't really know how to.
Well, we could just, I understand what you're trying to network. So now we know you're there, we're here, so something will come of that. That's out there, so you're going to get somebody.
And also permaculture.
Yeah, sign up for that.
You should get on that list.
Yeah.
There are permaculturists in town
Also, we could add you to our Green Acres list, that email list, and yeah, we'll email you, and then you can email us about maybe, finding someone to help you use your space, or us helping you use your space.
I think I don't know. It's exciting to me that, like, we have some friends who were here earlier, Brenda and Duncan, who live outside of town, and they're starting a bunch of their seeds, our seeds in our greenhouse, and then they're letting us use some of their space. So, like, the more people we hook up with more space, the more we can kind of, like, cooperatively, I don't know. I think that would be
You're
cool,
gonna be going out to their
cooperatively
farm
farm it.
tomorrow and mulching, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's certainly not limited to, like, our Green Acres neighborhood
We have
borders.
satellite locations all over
Yeah.
the satellite.
Hop around.
The trick is having the manpower, though, or woman power, or whatever, because
So I've got the tools, I wanna dig in the dirt, I have the basic knowledge, but I wanna take it to the next step and I wanna get involved.
Do you have other bedrooms in your house?
I have one.
Well, maybe fill it. Yeah,
intern or a woofer,
or a woofer.
could host woofers,
Kind of
yeah.
out bathroom and two smaller bedrooms too, to see, like, I don't even own a house, we just put in some nice. Help keeps the rent down.
Yeah.
Your friends with the master gardener next door?
She and I share plants and seeds.
Yeah, yeah, because that is the thing, I think, is working together. That's the opening our own selves up in our own space, and getting rid of the fear and being more open to cooperate. We need each other. It's hard to do anything by yourself. It just is, especially if you want. I mean, when you think, if you have a job, you got a garden, you want to put up your food, just those three things there, not to mention everything else that you're doing to keep yourself together, is a lot. And we need each other. We need each other to do that. There's just no way we could accomplish what we're doing now if we didn't have each other. We have to just try to open ourselves up more to work together. There's a lot of Asian people around that are used to community that don't have it, and they want it. They garden. They miss it. They miss the community. They miss gardening and depth with other people. There's all kinds of things you could do.
Are there any other questions? I just wanted to speak on going forward for Green Acres Village. There's so much opportunity, and there's a lot of other there's challenges that will be faced as well going forward. One of the best things about this community is that the values of it's set in values of permaculture. So experimenting, allowing the flows to come in through and let things happen the way they're supposed to. Looking forward, we need to have plans for financial succession, so that the village can stay viable. And these are long-term kind of strategies, not necessarily like very short-term, but how do we go forward into the next 50 years? How will, what are the seen and unforeseen challenges that we will face during that time? And I think it's going to take more than just this group to kind of come together and know all that. I think there's a lot of stakeholders that have a stake in Green Acres, even if you didn't know it. The broader community has a huge impact on this pod. And for me personally, I'm one of the things that I came to Green Acres with was doing the outreach. I wanted to find people in the neighborhood to come in. So now, as someone who's left the community, physically, I am still part of it, but trying to broaden that outreach, and we want to be able to be sustainable, like really sustain whatever is to come in the future. So that's kind of one of the things that is on my mind and in going forward in the future.
So if anybody ever has any questions about, their own food security or anything like that, there's lots of people in this audience even that you could call or tell somebody else that they can reach out to. Encourage people to cooperate and garden and get their food ready for the winters.
Come to our dinners.
Oh yeah, our dinners are every Wednesday at 6:30, and everybody's
One
welcome.
house or the other, you'll find out.
And it's not a potluck. Technically, we gift it. I mean, you're welcome to bring food if you want to, but we don't want to put that pressure initially on people. So, trying to encourage the gift economy
Tomorrow's gonna
even
be
more.
at the guest house. Unfortunately, I forgot to send out a message, and I'll do that when I get home.
Bring more peanuts.
Okay, good deal. Boiled peanuts.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.